When I got the call that I had the chance to spend a summer as a fire lookout, I really thought it had to be a joke. I've been on the waiting list for 2 years and almost forgot I put in an application. If you need something that pays immediately, this isn't the job for you. It's for people willing to sacrifice time and energy, being stuck for months in the middle of nowhere. To me, it felt like a dream come true. I've always loved the outdoors, and even though I knew taking this job would mean I'd be away from home for months, I wanted it. I was so excited to have this chance that I didn't think about the isolation until I got there. It's not that I want a future in forestry or anything, but this kind of job looks good on your resume even though it's fairly easy and laid back. At least, that's what I thought. I thought this was going to be a few easy, simple months, and my biggest worry would be figuring out how to fight the boredom. And that's honestly how it all started. I arrived in a forest ranger jeep. The guy driving hardly said 2 words to me on the ride up the mountain. When we finally got into the deep woods, he did start to talk. "Not many people out this way, not many fires either," he said. At least, I think that's what he said. But maybe I was nervous. I wasn't getting a good cell phone signal, and something told me it would be worse when I made it to the lookout. "So why did the last guy leave or quit or whatever?" I asked my driver as we went over a bump. The driver slowed down as we approached an old wooden bridge. You could feel the entire structure wobble as we drove over it. Very anxiety-inducing. And as we did, this dude finally opened up. I mean, he couldn't stop talking about the story surrounding the last ranger. He told me that the last ranger that worked this job hadn't actually left. He died while on duty. In fact, the rumor was he took his own life. A bullet to the brain. Couldn't take the isolation. I thought maybe the driver was trying to scare me, but he was dead serious. He also mentioned that they took the service pistol away, so no one else got the same crazy idea. Then he left me and my small backpack of supplies at the foot of the lookout. No fanfare or even a horn honk. For the next few months, I was going to be completely alone. So what did I bring? Honestly, a lot less than I should have. I had my chargers, my phone, my flashlight, and a few good books. These were my basics, and then I brought a few changes of clothes and some snacks. Nothing major. I was told there would be instructions about how the supply drops were handled out here, so I felt pretty secure about supplies. I took in the sights and sounds as I climbed the wooden stairs to the top of the lookout. The forest surrounded me in every direction. Evergreens and mountains, so majestic, it could take your breath away. It was so beautiful that I almost forgot what my driver had said. But it didn't take long for me to remember, when I made it to the top and pushed open the door. There was still some dried blood staining the carpet where the previous lookout had decided to take his life, and that was enough to dampen my mood. So I focused on trying to make this place home. These towers aren't exactly designed for privacy. There are windows all around so I could see in any direction. And there was no actual heat source, besides an old wood-burning stove. I guess that was where I was expected to cook. I put my supplies on the table and took off my boots. Worn out from the trip, I laid down on the bed. That was when I felt something hard underneath the pillow. I pulled it out, realizing it was a book. As I opened it, a flimsy piece of paper drifted out to the wooden floor below. Dropping the book, I chased after the paper, snatching it up as I leaned back on the bed. All lookouts must follow these rules while occupying the tower. The top of the note said, it was a short list, but I found the rules to be a little strange. 1. Lights out after 10 p.m., no electronics after this hour. 2. Supply drops are every Monday and Thursday. Use red flare to request extra. Use blue flare to indicate no supplies needed. Do not use them together. 3. Absolutely no guests in the lookout. 4. Safe combination is 8913. Open only if necessary. 5. Radio transmissions should be logged and sent to HQ every Sunday. Don't make copies for yourself or others. 6. If reporting a fire, use the emergency phone. No other emergencies will be handled using this method. 7. Remember to call your sister station before you sleep. I studied the list, taking out a pack of Ritz crackers and sitting at the table. It didn't look very official, so I guessed that the previous rangers had come up with these requirements. and that was why a few missing pieces of information were missing. Like, why would I need to open the safe? What exactly was in there? Or how was I supposed to handle other emergencies, besides fires? I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I pinned them to the refrigerator and looked outside to the east. In the distance, I could see the next lookout, my sister station. Better get to work, I thought to myself as I found the radio and turned it on. Since cell phones don't work around here, this would be my only communication. "Morning from Station 5 on Sentinel Peak," I said. Since there was no telling when I'd get a response, I put the radio down on the table and sorted out my other supplies. There wasn't much on the shelves in the tower, a few board games and some books to read. Once I finished mine, I checked the one that I'd found under my pillow, realizing it was probably the journal of the previous ranger. Unfortunately, it was written in what looked like French, so I wouldn't be able to figure it out anytime soon. Odd, they hired someone who doesn't speak the local language, I thought. I kinda squirreled away and organized the lookout for the rest of my shift until it was time to go to bed. Then, I sent a transmission to my sister station, telling them I was signing off for the day. To my surprise, this time they replied, saying they would be active for the next 12 hours. Was starting to wonder if anyone was out there, I said into the speaker. But no reply came, leading me to guess whoever was in the other station wasn't much for conversation. I got ready for bed and settled down. I even shut off my cell phone, even though I knew it didn't work out here. Best to listen to the rules, I thought with a chuckle. And then it was time for sleep. The next day was Thursday, which meant a supply drop. I tried to ask my sister's station where that would happen, but got no response. So I spent most of the morning using my binoculars to scan the horizon for a helicopter. Finally, around 10 a.m., the radio chirped with static and announced a drop had been made, which surprised me. I hadn't seen any drop, and I'd been watching for most of the morning. I climbed down the stairs of the lookout and was surprised to see 3 crates in a meadow less than 500 yards away. Maybe they drove them up here, I thought as I opened one of them. This was probably the first red flag since my arrival, but I was surprised to find that the first box contained nothing except rifle ammunition. It weighed a ton. I decided to carry as much as I could and left the rest in the crate, wondering if this was meant to scare away bears. They certainly want us to protect ourselves, I thought. When I returned to get the second crate, the other boxes were gone. Had they thought I didn't need the rest of the supplies? I tried to call over to my sister station to ask, but as usual, got no response. Guess this means I'll be eating crackers until Monday, I said to myself. Then I remembered the flares. I found the box and took out the red one, stood out on my balcony and fired it into the air. A long streak of red shot across the sky, and then static filled the radio. Extra supply drop confirmed. The voice sounded so robotic, and it made me wonder where they were watching me from. At the base of the stairs, I found another 3 crates. This time I chose the one to my right. It had a few loaves of bread, lunch meat and cheese. Exactly what I was hoping for. I couldn't take it all with me, and just like before, when I came back, the crates were gone. Checking the red flares, I counted that I had 6 altogether. I'll ask for more supplies another day, I thought to myself as I prepared my lunch. I was already starting to feel the loneliness of this place. The strangeness I had seen so far was not enough to cause alarm. And so, when I signed off that night, I told myself that it was just another quirk of the job. Over the first week, I settled into a very simple routine. Every day kinda just blended into the next. I finished my first book by the middle of the week and was honestly starting to get cabin fever. Contact with the other station was about the same. I never heard more than 2 words from him when I signed off for the night, and he certainly never checked on me. I began to wonder whether anyone was over there. After all, the ranger that brought me up here hadn't said anything about a sister station or rules. What if the previous lookout had made those rules just to mess with me? Of course, I also didn't know for sure who wrote the rules, but so far I had followed them. I almost opened the safe on Friday, out of curiosity, but something told me it was a bad idea. I didn't start to feel uneasy until I was almost finished with my second week, when I realized that I hadn't received a single radio transmission. Then on Sunday, I got a request from HQ to turn in all necessary communications. Was I supposed to trek over to the sister station and pick up theirs? I had nothing better to do, so I grabbed my gear and started to hike toward the West Rise. The terrain was brutal. Keep in mind, this is the middle of June, and temperatures are already starting to rise. On a normal day, it could be 90 degrees, and that would be considered cool. The day I decided to hike, it was almost 100 degrees with no breeze. I paused about halfway through the woods to set up a marker. I figured by the time I returned, it would be sunset. I was kinda hoping that whoever was stationed at the Western Rise might offer a drink or two, and we could shoot the shit. I was desperate for some kind of human interaction. But something happened before I got a chance to find out. After hiking for about an hour, a shadow crossed my vision. I looked up between the trees and saw what looked like a skinned deer carcass. It was dangling upside down on a tripwire between two strong fir trees. And there was a bucket underneath to catch the droplets of blood. It looked like a fresh kill, because blood was still slicking down the antlers into the bucket. I saw signs of freshly pressed grass that told me someone had been here recently. Then I heard a noise from the thicket, and I instinctively pulled out my firearm. A tall man entered the clearing. His face was covered and he was wearing traditional hunting gear, like he had been out here for quite a while. One thing was certain, this was not the ranger I hoped to meet. I warned him not to make any sudden movements, but to my surprise, he fell down into the grass and started to convulse. I realized that he must have been lost in the woods for a while, and collapsed the moment he saw me. I checked his vitals, then looked to see where the sun was in the sky. I'd have to take the stranger with me to the sister station. I pulled him onto my shoulder. He was barely conscious and mumbling. I couldn't understand a single word. It sounded like French or maybe Russian. I decided not to worry about it and focused on the trail ahead. The stranger was heavy, and I was exhausted already. The added weight wasn't making my hike any easier, and the sun was starting to set. When I finally reached the clearing by the station, I was confused. It looked identical to my own. I laid the stranger at the foot of the stairs and ran up, calling out to the ranger. When I got to the top, I discovered the lookout was empty, and it was an exact replica of my own. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but I've been at this place for almost a month. I've memorized every single detail, and this was like looking in a mirror. I stepped toward the balcony and looked toward the rise. The surrounding forest looked familiar too, as if I had gone in circles. That wasn't possible. I have an excellent sense of direction. I never get lost. I sighed in frustration and reached for the radio to send out a transmission. This is Sentient Peak. I'm reporting a hunter down near the lookout tower. Please send rescue crews immediately, I told them. But there was no response at all. I went back down to the base of the lookout to see how the stranger was doing. He was gone. I became immediately super alert of everything around me. Something was wrong with this place. I had felt this since arriving, but now I was certain of it. I went back to the lookout and sent out an SOS. Then I went to the red phone and attempted to dial headquarters. This wasn't a fire, but it was an emergency. All I got back was static. I've never felt uncomfortable in the woods, but this put me on edge. I was alone here. The sun was setting and the stranger had disappeared. Even though I didn't want to, I knew I needed rest. I put one of the chairs against the door as a blockade and slept in an old leatherback recliner. The night was empty and silent. The next day, my unease grew to a boiling point. I tried to survey and map the area, but it was no use. I would go out as far as I could, mark trees, and then return to the lookout. But when I went back to find those same marks, they were gone. The only time I ever saw signs of life were the supply drops and the occasional dead deer. By the end of the week, I knew that I was trapped here, but I didn't know why. Sentinel Peak was experiencing something supernatural, of that, I was sure. Every day was identical to the last, a Groundhog Day effect. It made me wonder how the supply drops even worked. If this is some kind of time loop, these supplies don't fit into the equation. So I focused on the rules, the strange list I was supposed to follow. I've already used the red phone and nothing bad happened. Maybe it was time to break the other rules. so I used the code for the safe to see what was inside. I don't know what I was expecting, but a VHS tape was definitely not high on my list. I looked around the cabin and found an old rabbit ears TV with a VCR built in. I connected it and put the tape in. I found myself staring at a recording of myself. Except that this version of me had been here much, much longer. As I listened to the words on the tape, my gut dropped and my heart raced. It's been 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days since I took up the position as a lookout here on Sentinel Peak. I have exhausted all means of escape except for this. When I opened the safe, there was a tape with a recording just like this one. Except the video showed a much older version of myself, trapped here for almost 5 years. I think that by recording over it, I can shorten the time I am trapped here. Or maybe bring an end to this, once and for all. When I finish this recording, I will be taking all my supplies and heading into the woods, as far as I can make it. I hope that when you see this, it will help you. Good luck, the recording told me. It ended there and spit the tape out. My mouth felt dry as I looked toward the horizon and considered the implications. I think it meant that the people who run this place were behind my entrapment. I tried to radio HQ again. This time I left a different message. This is Station 5. I'm signing off permanently from this location and setting this tower on fire. You heard right. I'm not going to be your lab rat anymore. I'm turning this place into ash, I shouted into the receiver. As usual, there was no response. Frustrated by the silence, I pushed over furniture and piled up books. Then I started a fire and kept it going full power, till I was sure it would spread. Grabbing my things along with the diary and flare guns, I left the lookout with the smell of smoke behind me. I didn't look back to watch the place burn. I'm honestly not sure how long I traveled till I found another dead deer. I set my gear down and waited for the stranger. He was a part of this. I knew it. I wasn't sure if the strange poacher was another version of myself or not, but I knew he'd have answers. I kept my gun ready and waited for his arrival. It was nearly midnight when he finally came. This time he didn't seem surprised to find me. "Sit down," I ordered. He complied, and I ordered him to take off his mask so I could see his face. When he did, it was just some young kid that I'd never met. Disappointed, I started asking questions. How long he'd been here, what this time loop was, and who was behind it all. He began to speak in a different language, and I realized who he was. "You wrote the rules," I said. I took out the diary and tossed it to him, demanding a translation. But all he did was babble in his foreign tongue. My anger and frustration grew to such a point that I aimed the gun and fired without even thinking. The stranger looked down at the blood gushing from his chest, and to my surprise, he smiled. He said something else, and if I had to wager a guess, he was saying thank you. He fell to the ground as I watched in abject horror, wondering if I had just shot an innocent man. The only thing I could do now was use the flare guns. This time, I fired 3 red flares. Stupid rules had never helped me the whole time I was here, I thought. Nothing happened at first. Then I heard the sound of a helicopter rotor. I looked up and saw it approaching with a spotlight on me. I probably looked like a mountain man, but I didn't care. I waved my arms frantically until they landed. As soon as I saw the people inside, my excitement turned to anger as I realized they had been monitoring everything. I aimed my gun at them and ordered them to let me aboard. The men let me in and also picked up the corpse of the stranger, checking a tattoo on his side which had the Roman numeral 12 on it. As we lifted off, they asked me a simple question that I hadn't even stopped to think about. Why did I break the rules? I took a moment to stare down at the fiery remains of Sentinel Peak. I was desperate. I needed out. It was the only thing I had left, I told them. They nodded and then issued an update to their superiors on the radio. "We have Subject 13 on board," they said. Before I could ask what that meant, I felt a sharp sting in my neck and the world went black. I woke up in a military hospital, and the ranger that first recruited me brought me a hefty paycheck and a waiver I was told to sign, which I assume was meant to buy my silence. I had so many questions, and I needed answers. Damn it, I was your guinea pig for almost 2 months. I deserve to know the truth. He thought it over, then offered me something else, instead of answers. A job. He told me the only way to find the truth would be to go back to the lookout and agree to the experiment. My hands shook, but I signed the agreement. I know this is a mistake, but I feel drawn to this place. Trapped there. It's the only time I have ever felt a part of something beyond my understanding. I am scared to return, if I'm being honest. But I also suspect that I never left. The lookout never burned. I never killed the poacher. I never got rescued. All this was just a part of their experiment to see what rules I would break, to test my limits. So when I return, and everything resets, I will be tested in new ways, given new rules, while I try to keep my sanity. I may go crazy, but I have to find the truth. This is Station 5 of Sentinel Peak. I'm signing on.